Miguel.
Good morning. I come to this both personally and academically. The paper I supposed to present at this conference, which the content of which you'll hear today, in probably a more interesting format, no less, was asking the question: where did queer courses come from? What are they? And more importantly, do they deserve to exist? And will they exist into the future? Are they just an artifact of a curious time in history and will fade out? Or is it a new thing, a new line that will exist for a long time to come? The personal route by which I come to this topic is, as Kathy mentioned, I conducted the Portland, Maine, M-A-I-N-E, the Maine Gay Men's Chorus. It was my first job ever after college. It was not the job I was looking for. It was not what I expected. I had gone to a conservatory and I was a first-rate snob. I was going to conduct, all the big, difficult music and impress everyone. And then I got a gay men's chorus job, and I realized it's a lot more difficult. So, to me, that choral world, that entry into the choral world was really just about working with real singers in a real community. It was no longer an abstract thing to study. It was a community chorus. And all the challenges that any of you have, putting together Unima, the rehearsals, and just getting people to your rehearsals at church, things like that, it's all the same. But it became quickly clear to me, we'll get into that later. So I conducted a gay men's chorus, and it was called the Maine Gay Men's Chorus, this model of a name, some geography gay men's chorus. We were one of the GMCs, we would say, oh, which GMC are you with? Some of the original ones did not take that route for naming. There's the Turtle Creek Chorale, which is an enormous kind of cultural and artistic force in Texas now, TCC. So they're what we would call, less now, but used to be referred to as one of the choruses that's not one of the G-word choruses. And this seems almost silly. Why would we distinguish Seattle Men's Chorus from the Los Angeles Gay Men's Chorus? But in the beginning of the movement, and Turtle Creek and Seattle were kind of some of the grandfathers of this movement, it was pretty toxic to put the G word into your title. It was in and of itself a very political act. And some people probably wouldn't have even felt comfortable going to the rehearsals if people knew they were going to a gay men's chorus rehearsal. So that was part of their identity forming. And they still get flack for it today. Some of the G-word choruses still tease them about that. The San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus came about in '78, so a lot of people think it was the first gay men's chorus. It was not. The first queer chorus in the United States was Muse, actually, 1975?
Anna Crucis.
I'm sorry, Anna Crucis, one of your other projects. She started the first queer chorus that's, I think, still around in the United States, 1975. 1978, San Francisco started, and it was just a bunch of guys that wanted to sing. It was very small. They started, I think in their first concert, they did Brahms and I think some Palestrina or something. I have it in my notes, but nothing at all remarkable in terms of repertoire. They're just very traditional repertoire. And weeks after they began, Harvey Milk, who was a politician, many of you probably know that name, there's been a movie about him recently. Harvey Milk was assassinated, was shot in the head in his office at City Hall at the same time that the mayor of San Francisco was killed. Watch the movie. It'll move you. It was a shocking crime and a shocking jolt to the whole queer community and to Americans in general that this movement has now come to the point that we are assassinating public figures. That night, the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus had its first public performance, unexpectedly, and they sang Brahms on the front steps of San Francisco City Hall. And the urgency of the movement became immediate. It was immediate. We had to sing. We had to give voice to this. And from that point, the AIDS epidemic suddenly flooded the airways. Within 3 or 4 years, early 80s, AIDS was all over the news in the United States. It was called GRID, Gay-Related Infectious Disease, GRID, which is just a terrible thing to think about, a terrible name. And they were there, they were singing about that. And all through the 80s, that was much of their identity.
So I am from Pittsburgh. It's where I started the women's choir in '95, and Dreams of Hope is a queer youth and allies. A is for everyone else who's heterosexual or doesn't want to be labeled. There are many young people now in the United States and in Europe who don't want any label at all. They don't want to be called gay, they don't want to be called straight, which is the other word for homosexual or for heterosexual. They want to just have no labels. So this generation of young people is using the word queer as a catch-all, like you were saying. But in Pittsburgh, which is a very conservative place, every time we use the word queer, we have to talk to an audience about the history of that word, so that they understand why we're using it, because otherwise people are very offended in Pittsburgh. So, the United States and every other country is the whole spectrum of people accepting and not accepting. So I was going to talk a little bit about my chorus that I founded in '95 was actually under the umbrella with a men's chorus, and so we sang together SATB music, and that is actually the fastest growing number of choruses in the LGBT choral movement, is the SATB chorus. So it started out with large numbers of feminist women's choruses and gay men's choruses, but now the largest growing number is mixed, and that's true in other parts of the world. South Africa, Israel, Australia, New Zealand. There are these mixed choruses, which is really wonderful because it's bringing the communities together in new ways. The other group that I started in 2003, Dreams of Hope, the youth group, is a whole different animal, because the parents don't bring the kids to rehearsal and then take them home. Some of the kids are homeless. Many of the kids have dropped out of school for traditional reasons of being bullied or kicked out of their home. It's a very transient population, and so there's a component of social work. We have an organization we work with that we can send kids to for extra help in their life skills. It goes way beyond music, which is sort of what a community chorus can do if it's meeting the needs of that community. So that's the youth. Also, we have transgender young people. So do you know what transgender is? Can you raise your hand if you have any idea what transgender means? Okay, so these are people who are born one sex, but are actually the other sex. So they have to somehow find a way to be who they are and live as who they are within their own body. And some people choose to change their body physically through taking hormones and also operations, and some people choose not to do that. So we have transgender people who are now in the gay and lesbian movement, which is a whole other subject because it's a different topic. But along with these people who are transforming their gender through hormones, there are changes in their voice. So this is a whole other aspect that we deal with in our adult and youth choruses. And I think those are the choruses I wanted to talk about, so we'll leave it there for now.
Before I turn it back over to Miguel, I just wanted to say that my reasons for starting Anacrusis in Philadelphia in 1975 were many, because I think that women's choruses are in a different category in a way. We have a lot of makeup work to do. Is there substantial repertoire for women's choruses, the adult, mature community women's choruses? And so Anacrusis started out, it was very important to commission works for women, by women, and often with texts by women. When I started Anacrusis, and also when I started Muse, it was very important to me to have a mix of lesbian and heterosexual and bisexual women, that grouping of people come together in a women's choir. And whereas and I think we're going to talk about this, in the 70s when I started Anacrusis, we probably were more lesbian than heterosexual, and I don't know what the percentages are in Anacrusis right now, but in Muse it was very much the same when we started. Probably 2/3 of the choir was lesbian and 1/3 straight, and now it's really turned around and it's very different. Probably 3/4 of the women are straight and 1/4 lesbian. But the importance of those groups coming together, it's a women's choir, and so we sing. Repertoire is very important, and we're a very diverse choir in other kinds of ways. So I think that you'll see when we talk about this movement, and it is a gay and lesbian choral movement that officially begins sort of in the 70s, and it's known for many different kinds of things. I think commissioning is one thing, commissioning music, bringing diverse kinds of people together, and I think that you want to know that in various communities across the country, that the gay and lesbian choruses look very different and identify differently. If you're in Texas, it's one thing. If you're in Maine or Seattle or Chicago, how these choruses form and how they operate differs a great deal. So I think that we'll be addressing that.
Yeah,
But,
I'll pick up on that because some of my young people in Dreams of Hope are not interested in going into the Renaissance City Choirs, which is the gay LGBT chorus in Pittsburgh, specifically because of repertoire. There's just no interest there. And one of the reasons that I started the youth group was because I'm a composer and I wanted to hear the stories of the youth, and I felt that they were the best people to tell it through the arts, and that the arts reach people in very different ways than someone standing up there saying, you have to accept gay people and transgender people. Blah, blah, blah. No, if you have a performance that of their work that they are expressing, and then they talk to you about their lives, it's a much more direct way of reaching people and opening them up to discussion. So when I formed Dreams of Hope, I formed it on an outreach model. So we do about 20 shows a year, and we go into schools. We go mainly to teachers. We have been to the judges in family court in Pittsburgh, in the county. We've been invited to perform for Secretary Arne Duncan, Secretary of Education, next October. And the structure of the show, each fall, we also do multidisciplinary arts, so it's not just chorus. There's dance, choreography, composing, playwriting, and spoken word. And this way we sort of catch the talents, everyone's talents. So there are people who would never join a chorus but love spoken word or poetry. And kids love poetry in general. They love to write about themselves. So we do this outreach. We create a show each fall, a new show, multidisciplinary show, and then we take it on the road. And we sort of beat down the doors. We've gone to unions. We've performed in West Virginia 5 times now over the years for social workers. And we now have a summer camp in West Virginia. So we are a resource for the state of West Virginia because there's nothing really for LGBT people down in West Virginia. The other thing I want to mention about allies or heterosexual people, kids, young people don't see this as an issue. And if, for the most part, people are open. And so we've always had heterosexual youth in our group performing with the sexual and gender minority youth, which is really amazing. So we have a component of our performance that's about how to be an ally, how to support the LGBT community, how to take the phrase, "that's so gay." This is an educational DVD that we made a few years ago because we couldn't do all the outreach shows that people want us to do. We just don't have time to perform in all the places that want to hear these young people and talk to them. So after the performance, they lead a discussion with the audience about issues that they face in their schools or on the street or with their family, with their church, synagogue. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey for me, 9 years now, so.
I had a 23-year-old in tears in the chorus office talking to me about, he had not grown up in a homophobic society. He grew up in a lovely society with supportive parents. His story was the ideal growing up queer story. And his participation in the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus was transformative. He found his place as a 23-year-old, and he was socializing with people of all different ages and races right there in San Francisco, and dating. You know, he was dating guys in the chorus, which that's really important. People are looking for mates in life, and I think they're drawn to choruses for that purpose in some way. I don't think that's bad at all. I married one of my choristers. It's a long story, but it sounds worse than it is. And the things that drew him in, helping to identify in a way that could be public, could be artistic, and wasn't related to the elements of homosexuality that are maybe perhaps most portrayed in the popular media. He was doing something creative, and he felt much like the work you're doing. He felt as though his energies, his offerings to the world, what he could share, were finally given platform. And in a group of 300 men, he finally felt as though he'd found his voice. That group is growing, and is growing very well. They're singing very well too. They're getting really strong vocal technique right in rehearsals. So they're not overlooking the issue of kind of artistic excellence in any way. And they're still doing the campy fun shows, which I think people love. The conclusion I kind of came to is that I think queer-related arts organizations are absolutely going to go on, and I think they could go on indefinitely. And the reason why I think that is because all people are fundamentally looking for place. I think all people are fundamentally looking for family. And I think many of us will always be on the search for partners, both as friends and as lovers. And kind of our whole scheme in life is to look for these places to be and to express ourselves. And that'll never change. I don't think that'll ever be altered by the acceptance of various sexual identities. And so these choruses, I think, will always be the place that people can go to find that, whether it's a faith-based thing, whether it's a gender-based thing, for whatever reason. I think gay men's choruses will go on if well run.
Yeah, and just briefly, the young people that come to Dreams of Hope are frequently depressed and isolated. They feel like they're the only gay or transgender person in their school or in their world, in their church, in their synagogue. And when they find the chorus, or in this case, a multidisciplinary organization, they find community. And it is a community supporting them. We help them get their GED, which is, if they've dropped out of high school, it's their diploma for high school. We help them find financial aid for college. I mean, there's this whole network of support for these kids. Even kids who are in better schools, there's still not support in Pittsburgh for sexual and gender minorities in an open way. This is how you find financial aid to go to college. You know, these very basic things that we don't really think about when we're in a heteronormative society.